The idea of having kids do anything that's unsafe nowadays is so pushed back against. Nobody wants kids to operate heavy equipment or work an adult's job. Um, Child labor laws are a symptom of this overall nervousness about allowing kids to actually grow up.
Hello and welcome to Collapse Life, a thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. I'm Zahra Sethna, your host. Before we get started, I wanted to ask you to hit that subscribe button, and you may as well go ahead and hit that like button too, because I know you're going to love today's episode. We deal with some pretty serious issues on this podcast, and at times it can leave you feeling a bit bleak about future prospects. Well, I'm happy to say that our guest today is someone who is likely to give you hope for the future and a reason to smile. His name is Maxim Benjamin Smith, and he's 19 years old. He doesn't have a job, he's not in school, but he's not some lazy teenager hanging out in his parents' basement playing video games. When Maxim's not fighting forest fires, he might be shoeing horses or learning Spanish or mastering chess, sorry. Today, he's going to tell us about how he's taking an alternative path to preparing for life, real life. Welcome to Collapse Life, Maxim.
Thank you for having me, Zara. I appreciate it.
It's a conversation I've been really looking forward to having. So let's start by tell us a little bit about this program that you're embarking on, beta testing, so to speak. It's called The Preparation. We first heard about it when we interviewed your father, Matt Smith, on this podcast a couple of months ago. So tell us a little bit about it and how the idea first came about.
Well, this thing that we call the preparation, this program was designed by my dad and Doug Casey, which I don't know if you guys have had him on, but hopefully you do at some point. Uh, and the program basically started off with Doug coming up with a list of games, activities, and occupations that he thought if a young man participated in these things, mastered some of these skills, it would make him at least much closer to being a Renaissance man. And I don't remember all the things that were on the list. I know that the games section made up of chess, poker, going bridge, and activities were like scuba diving, becoming a private pilot, things like that. And then occupations, EMT was on there. I think my dad added that. Writing, sales, marketing, all those things. But it was just about trying to gain as many skills as possible. And so that's where it all started. And then as my dad developed it further and kind of made me the beta tester over time, it's developed quite a lot. And basically, to summarize the program, it's an alternative to college, the military, and a dead end job, which are pretty much the main choices that most people my age have nowadays. You go down that path or you don't. And if you don't, you're a loser. And everyone thinks that you're not going to go anywhere in life. Whereas instead, the preparation, gaining as many skills as possible, having lots of interesting experiences, meeting lots of good people. And you definitely meet lots of good people when you put yourself out there as someone who's interested in learning things, learning skills. And it's really designed to be a 4-year program just to fit the natural amount of time that people spend in college. But
Mhm.
the great thing about it is that it's not a step by step process. It's not do this and then that, you'll get this end result. It's completely self directed. We're developing a book for it now to kind of give the outlines of the preparation, but all the core content has to be generated by the individual himself. So it could be 4 years, it could be 2 years, could be 1 year, could be 8 years. Who knows? But it's primarily about gaining skills, real skills that are actually going to aid you in your life.
And what do you think it is about the current options that young people like you are offered that's lacking in terms of those skills that you and Doug and your dad think are necessary?
Well, if you go to college, you're already starting off with a poor base because our education system is so terrible. You don't learn very much. But if you go to college, you're throwing away time and money, valuable time, especially during years where you have so much energy that you can put into actually useful things, and you're just saying, never mind. I'd rather have the college experience, whatever that is. And so far, the only argument in favor of college I've heard of time and time again is, well, I mean, yeah, but if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, okay, so what? 4% of people, 2% of people who are going to college, and also, you're not gonna, if you have any brains, you're not gonna trust most doctors or lawyers nowadays. Um, but you have that option of throwing away time and money. You could go straight into a dead end job from high school, which no one wants to do. Or you could go to the military and become a slave for the government. So, all of those, you're going to learn skills. I guess if you go to college, the most obvious one is people skills, social skills. You're going to learn skills in the military. And whatever your dead end job requires, you're going to learn something. But if you're trapping yourself in one of those three main avenues, you're completely missing out on real life experiences where you can gain actual skills that are not only going to benefit you, but are going to could benefit countless other people as well.
So let's take one of those skills, for example, and let's kind of unpack it and talk about it. So, for example, you mentioned scuba diving was on that list. And because I follow you on your blog, I know that you just recently became a certified PADI deep water scuba diver. I think that's correct, right? So, why is that a skill that you wanted to master? What did you learn other than, how to um, scuba dive? What did you learn from it, or what do you hope to take from it that will be a useful tool in your arsenal?
Scuba diving is an interesting one because I had zero interest in actually doing it. I don't like the water. I'm definitely far from mastering that skill as well. I just got the basic open water certification, which requires just the closed water pool dive, some online stuff, and then 4 open water dives. And I think the requirement is a full dive is 20 minutes. So just 4 20-minute dives. Um, and really, the purpose of that was just to do something that makes me uncomfortable. And I guess anytime you gain another skill or a skill and a certification with that, you don't know where that might lead. I mean, the biggest example of that for me is getting my EMT certification, which I finished EMT school about a year ago. And it was a 3 year school. I had zero interest in becoming an EMT, um, but my dad encouraged me to start it. So I went through the 3 months of schooling, finally got the certification after I took the national exam, and I didn't really expect anything to come out of it. But then this past summer, it allowed me to work as an EMT on wildfires, which is something I would never have been able to imagine that being the path that certification took.
Right.
So there's a high chance that the scuba thing might not go anywhere, and it might just be certification that I acquired, even though I didn't want to, but it could lead down an interesting path. I did meet someone, a very interesting man, very impressive man, back in, I believe, April or May, and he taught me how to pack horses and mules into the backcountry. But one of the things he did for quite a while was be a scuba instructor, and he made a fair amount of money off of doing that. And it was also very interesting. So who knows where it could go? But it was more just a thing to. It was a self-conquering thing, getting over the
Yeah.
fear of being in water and breathing underwater is very out of your mouth, especially. It's very very difficult. It's weird, but
Yeah.
that was the main purpose of it.
I think it's a perfect, actually, example of how you're approaching life so differently from most people your age. And I mean, you went back, you said, college might be useful for someone who wants to be a doctor or who wants to be a lawyer or something like that. And that, I think, is just a perfect example of how we ask young people, what do you want to be? Rather than asking them, who do you want to be? Because I think you could end up in very different places by answering that question. If you say, what do you want to be? Oh, I want to be an engineer, for example.
Mhm.
Then there's maybe a very narrow path that might lead you to that goal, and you might reach that goal and achieve it, but it will be very specific. But if you sort of say, instead, answering the question, who do I want to be? I want to be someone who knows how to build things, who understands how small components fit together into a larger system, who can kind of take on complexity. Then you can answer that in a number of different ways and maybe reach the end point of becoming an engineer, or maybe reach the end point of becoming something completely different that you had never really thought about. So I think um, it seems like what you're doing is opening up a world rather than closing down a world.
Yeah, for sure. All of the important men or men that I aspired to be like throughout history were not. They never confined themselves to one thing. They might have been known for one thing, something that they were exceptionally good at, or a certain moment where they rose to the occasion in a public setting under under the public eye. But besides that one thing that they were very well known for, there was a vast amount of other things that they pursued that didn't have any immediate or obvious connection with the ultimate thing that they were known for or with each other, but it encompassed their being, which, like you said, the real question is, who do you want to be, not what do you want to do? Um, I think Doug has talked about this in the past, Doug Casey. Be, do, and have. Those are the three main things in life that people you have to pursue: being, doing, and having. But nowadays we focus on having instead of being and doing.
Mm-hmm.
And what little we focus on doing, uh, there, it needs to be intertwined with being as well. So that's lost. But anyway, all the men that I I look up to through history, like Louis L'Amour is a good example, and he is a famous Western author who sold over 200 million copies now of his books, in translated in 20 different language, and I think 30 of his stories were adapted into movies. But he lived a very interesting life. He left home at 15 years old, and he lived during the Great Depression, so he left home in search for work. He hoboed around the country, working various odd jobs. He was a lumberjack. He was a caretaker of a mine for a short period of time. He skinned dead cattle. He ended up becoming a boxer and winning, I think, 51 out of 59 fights. He did so many things. He was an elephant handler, a seaman, so many different, it's a vast array of things and that sort of life seems unimaginable to people nowadays because they confine themselves to a certain path. But all those experiences did end up leading to the main aspect of his life, which was writing. Because he acquired so many stories from all the things he did, not just from his own life, but from speaking to other people who lived very interesting lives. I think reading his book, um, he met a man who his family was raided by Indians when he was young, and because he was around like 7 years old, the Indians took him in, raised him, and he became part of their tribe. But he got to meet that man and speak to that man and hear about the stories uh,
Mm.
that man had to tell. So he gathered all these stories, which led to the main aspect of his life, the thing he was known for.
Right.
But everything else was just as important.
The life experience is what led to him being able to tell those stories. Otherwise, they're just fantasy, really.
Yeah.
Um, there's going to be definitely by now questions on people's minds in terms of what this kind of thing might cost. And people might be thinking, oh, well, it might be nice for Maxim if, he can pay for a scuba diving course or go study to be an EMT, even if he doesn't want to do that. So, talk a little bit about, some people might feel like they have to go to a dead end job or have to go to the military because they need to start making some money, and they wouldn't be able to do something like what you're doing. So, talk a little bit about that,
Hmm.
and then I have a follow up question to that.
Okay. Well, working and making money is a key aspect of the preparation, which is something I usually tend to forget mentioning. But in the very beginning, right when I started EMT school, I also worked two menial jobs during that time. I worked at Office Depot for a few months, and then I worked at a small pizza chain for a very short amount of time. And I didn't make very much money at all. Maybe it was like $6,000 in total, so really nothing. But EMT school was about $1,500, and then getting your certification, your scuba certification, is really not that much money. But even just making $1,500 to start EMT school, and it's going to be a little more than that because you factor in all the costs, all the expenses of getting gas, traveling there multiple times a week, all those things. But
Mhm.
even if you just make a little bit of money, now you have this certification, which, like I said, can lead you down paths you could never imagined. And then working on wildland fires, it pays very well, and that all stemmed from becoming an EMT.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we get paid on a hourly rate for fires, but for me, working as an EMT at the time I worked, because the pay fluctuates over the course of the season. But I was getting paid a total of $600 a day working
Mhm.
as an EMT. Um, and but again, that was all just from getting a $1,500 certification and paying a little bit more to take the national exam, which completely made me certified.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a great way to frame it. Is, there may be some costs up front, but you never know what it might lead to that will pay that back in spades. But
yes,
also, as you said, it's important to note that you actually did work. So you're not looking for a dead end job as your permanent path. But if you have to work a job along the way, that is part of your program. Yeah.
absolutely. It's meant to be a vehicle towards a transitional thing towards something better. Like you have to have in your mind, like, okay, I'm gonna do this for 2 to 3 months, make this much money, and then I'm done. And after working that much and making this amount of money, it will allow me to do this, which will hopefully lead to something better. So I mean, everybody has a different situation. I am fortunate that my dad just over the course of my life has basically piled money into a little bit of money, the equivalent of a year's worth of tuition at a more prestigious school,
Hmm.
which I've been able to use to fund some of the things I do. But everybody has different situations. Maybe if you're starting out from nothing, of course, you're going to have to start working a menial job. But even with the little bit of money I did have, just from my father saving some money for me over time before I turned 18, I still worked a menial job. I still did that because it's important to make your own money. So yes, it depends on the person's situation, but if you need to make money, work a menial job and use it as a vehicle.
Great. I think the other piece, and this was my follow up question, is obviously you have the support of your parents to follow this kind of path, and in fact, this was your father's kind of brainchild in a way. And maybe you could talk about whether your mother is as unconditionally supportive, but there might be, as you probably know from your peers, there might be other parents out there who think, no, that's crazy. I'm, there may be more conventional thinkers, and they may think, no, my kid has to follow a particular path. If they don't go to college, their life is over. So speak to that a little bit. And what would you say to parents or to other young people like you on that front?
I'd say that if you are going to force your child to take one of the three main avenues our culture presents, that you are putting them at a major disadvantage. A major disadvantage. And maybe if you want them to go to college, which I'd say out of the three main avenues, it's most likely going to be college. At least that's what I've noticed being the main path. If they're not paying it for it, then you're paying for it. And so that's going to be money down the drain. And who knows if that that path is actually going to work out for them, or who knows if it's going to be something they actually care about after 6 months, a year, 3 years in college. They might have a completely different interest. But even besides the money and time spent doing that, what what skills are they going to learn, and are they going to learn anything that actually benefits them over time, that will actually set them up to live a good life? Because I think any parent wants their kids to be happy, and they're hopefully going to make the choices that they think are best for their children. And over time, that's especially recently, it's been it's thought that the path of college or the military dead end job is the best path, but I think more and more it's become clear that it's not. And so you're going to put them at a major disadvantage, especially especially if you can find them to those paths. So I'd say if you are a parent and you are skeptical about this program, the preparation, that you can just look at my more notable accomplishments over the past year, which have allowed me to do a significant amount of things within just 1 year's time,
Yeah.
which have also allowed me to acquire skills that will stick with me forever. Maybe I have to go back and relearn them, but my options are countless compared to the person who goes to college and sticks on that path for
Right.
who knows how long.
Right. After the first year of college, which is about the same time frame, you started this about a year ago. So after 1 year in college, would the Maxim who went to college have the same skill set, the same knowledge, the same life skills or emotional maturity than you would have had if you did what you did? So I think that's maybe the way to lay it out. Lay out the costs, lay out the skills that you might learn in college, and then say, how could I learn these skills in a different way?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So, one thing I wanted to ask you about, we don't have a lot of people your age come on this podcast, but one thing that we've read about a lot and heard about a lot is that people your age are actually being classed as the sort of the anxious generation. And I can attest in my life, having met people around your age, male and female, who always talk about their anxiety disorders very openly, or the PTSD that they suffer from. And so I wanted to ask you, coming from that age group, why do you think that is? Or do you think that's true? Is this something that older generations are imposing on your age group? If it is true, why do you think it's true? And do you think that a program like the preparation could actually help alleviate some of that?
It's difficult. I think that's a that could this topic one topic in of itself could take up a whole podcast. But I think a good portion of all of that is the push to diagnose as many people as possible with disorders of some kind, and put them on anti-anxiety meds or antidepressants or any of those things, really. But at the same time, there are a lot of people in my generation who definitely are more anxious than generations in the past. I noticed it within myself. I definitely used to be much more anxious. I'd say when I was 17, I had a lot of social anxiety. Like any social event would be, I try to stay away from it as much as possible. Hide away from
Mhm.
it, not go. Uh, and I feel like the best cure for that is it's going through it, forcing yourself through it. There's no there's no way to it's you're never going to be rid of it. It's always going to be around. And so, yes, I think there's a lot of people in my generation who suffer from it, but it comes from a it comes from the fact that kids' lives, the life of a kid is extended so much further or treated like kids for so much longer. And because
Mhm.
of that, we never get to do the things that actually give people some sense of confidence, which comes from learning a skill or even just learning more about a certain subject. Like when I was maybe 7 years old, I was very interested in meteorology. And just even learning that subject in of itself made me more confident overall during
Mhm.
that time. It's very strange. But learning skills and like the idea of having kids do anything that's unsafe nowadays is so pushed back against. Nobody wants kids to operate heavy equipment or work an adult's job. Um, I mean, child labor laws are a symptom of this overall nervousness about allowing kids to actually grow up, and that stunts the growth. Absolutely stunts the growth, and COVID did not help with that at all.
Yes.
Keeping kids inside, and people, of course, the social aspect of things is a very big part of that. But again, if you're staying inside, if you're a teenage boy, you're probably going to be playing video games.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what teenage girls do. I can't speak for that, but you're not going to be doing very much. You're not going to be learning things. And over the past year, there were basically everything I did. There's been a layer of fear behind it, no matter what it was. Whether it was starting EMT school, working on wildfires, um, going to Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes, or learning new things here on the farm. There's always an aspect of fear, but the obstacle is the way. That's the best way to summarize it. The obstacle is the way, and that's the cure for it.
That's um that's amazing because I mean we all have that, right? We all feel a little fear when we're doing something that's unknown or something that's new to us, or we think we may not succeed. We feel a little fear. But at 19, to feel so kind of invincible. I mean, I suppose that maybe when we're younger we do feel kind of unbeatable, but let me turn that into a question. Were there any times over the past year where fear almost stopped you from moving forward?
Uh, yeah, yeah, for sure.
And what moved
EMT,
you forward?
that's a. I need to think about that one a little bit more. But EMT school, and that was the very beginning of everything. That was as soon as I heard that idea of going to EMT school, I came up with a million reasons why I shouldn't or why I don't need to. Um, but there were times this past year where it did stop me from doing things. Like I could have gotten this scuba certification 9, I guess 10 months ago, but I just let myself kind of I let myself fear and not act. So I didn't do it, and I could have started Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff here in Uruguay sooner, but I felt that little fear, and because I felt that little fear, I didn't do it. And so those were two times for sure where
Hmm.
I I can't get it out of my mind, even though it's really inconsequential. It was still something that bothers me because I didn't overcome that. But what pulled me out of it? That's or what pushed me forward. It's a realization of the original idea, which is not easy to constantly keep in your mind. It's
Hmm.
really very difficult. And for anyone who wants to go through the preparation or wants their kids to go through the preparation or grandkids, learning skills, that's all good and it's necessary, it's fantastic, but there needs to be an overarching idea behind it, an overarching vision. And it's not about, again, having, like, what am I going to get out of this? How much money can I make if I learn this skill? It's about being. And so the first story that came to mind when all of this started a little over a year ago was the story of the Count of Monte Cristo. And he spent, I've heard, 14, like between 13 and 15 years in the Chateau d'If. And before then, he was a young man, 19 years old. He had the girl. He had the brand new job as captain of the Pharaon, which was a merchant ship. And the story is based in early 1800s France. So he has everything. His life is heading in the right direction. But he's betrayed by a group of people and sent to the Chateau d'If, the
Which
equivalent.
is a prison.
Yes, basically equivalent of a maximum security prison nowadays, on an island in the middle of nowhere. And he's there. The first 6 years, he's he's getting whipped on the anniversary of his imprisonment. Every day is just dread and sorrow. And there's this writing on the wall that I believe said, "God will give me justice," and it was written by a former prisoner. And that inspired him at first, but over time, he doesn't see a way out.
Hmm.
So he gets to the point where he hits rock bottom, and then he ends up meeting a priest, Abbe Faria, who stumbles into his cell by accident. He digs his way into the cell by accident, trying to find a way out.
Hmm.
And the next 8 or so years are spent trying to acquire as many skills and as much knowledge as possible about economics. He's learning different languages, sword fighting, hand to hand combat. A vast array of skills and knowledge is acquired during that time from the old priest. And then Edmond Dantes, the main character, he gets the chance to escape the prison. And because of all the skills he's acquired, he's able to exact revenge on the people who put him there, but he's unstoppable, completely and utterly unstoppable because of all he has on top of his just sheer will. So that was the main story that was and is inspirational to me. And that's part of my bigger vision. That's how you push through
Hmm.
the moments where you don't want to go.
I noticed that you've built accountability into your program as well, or into your process. So you have a Substack and you write weekly, you write a post labeled what I did this week. And you tell your audience, for what it's worth, whether they read it or not, what you've been up to. And I wonder if that process is also part of helping you push through to do the things that you don't want to do, because you're publicly declaring what you're going to do and then you're going back and actually chronicling whether or not you did it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my this was another idea from my dad. I think I started documenting what I am doing every week when I was 18 weeks into the program, and it's definitely been a big help with holding myself accountable because if I could have had a good week and gotten a lot done, but I didn't, and I chose not to, willingly chose not to, and now I have to sit down and go, well, I there wasn't much done this week, but here's the books I read. Then I feel disappointed in myself. And I felt disappointed in myself even when I didn't have that many people following the Substack.
Mhm.
But now that more and more people are following it over time, I think now it's over 3,000 people.
Great.
And now meeting these people in person too, I've been able to meet a few of them now. I have this huge obligation, or at least it feels like a huge obligation to go and actually get things done even more. I have people who are interested in this program and want to see me succeed and get things done and want me to embody the program and develop it for their for the use of their kids or themselves or their grandkids. So yeah, if I don't show up, it's a big letdown to them and to me, really. So
Yeah.
accountability is a major portion of it now.
That's amazing. And I guess either you've become very self-disciplined or you were always naturally that way. And I think that's another thing I wanted to ask you about because there, I'm sure, many other young men sitting around with time on their hands who are not in school, not in a job, not in the military, and they're not doing what you're doing, even though they could, because some of the things that you're doing, you're teaching yourself online for free or for a very low cost. They're not doing it. So um, tell us a little bit about how you motivate yourself and how you avoid the typical pitfalls that all of us feel, but especially that we felt when we were teenagers of, I don't want to do anything today. I just want to watch movies or play video games or go on social media or do more damaging things like drinking or doing recreational drugs or watching porn or whatever. How do you avoid the temptation of those things? How do you avoid any kind of peer pressure that you might be feeling? And how do you keep yourself on a disciplined path?
I've been fortunate enough. I think I've inherited it from my father. I don't really feel peer pressure, which is a huge blessing. Um, but discipline comes from you need that overarching vision and idea of your life and who you want to become. At least in the very beginning. I mean, it's important over time. You need it over time, absolutely, because there's going to be times where you forget about that vision, that overall vision, and lose sight of your of your goal. So you need that to start off, but over time, if you're actually getting things done, if you're actually sticking to the things that you say you're going to do, you're going to stack up a list of things that you're going to be proud of. And if you stop holding yourself accountable and you become undisciplined, you're going to be even more disappointed with yourself if you have
Right.
all these accomplishments behind you and you go, forget about it. I mean, now, even though I am a terrible chess player, now that I've been playing it for a year, if I stop, it's, I would be disappointed in myself. It's, even though I don't really, I'm not too interested in chess. If I stop, it's become a discipline based thing for me to do it every day.
Mhm.
So, really, you need a set of things that you require of yourself to do every day, along with that overarching vision. So, for me, the basic, more discipline based things that I do every day is read, work out, play 30 minutes of chess, and usually 30 minutes of Spanish practice, but now I have a tutor, so it's about an hour. And those are the base things that I need. And if even if I don't get one of those small things done, that does seem inconsequential overall, I'm still let down because I could have done it. I have so much time. All young men have so much time, a mass amount of time that is going to be filled with those things, like you said, like porn or video games or whatever. I guess hanging out with friends, that's a good thing though. But all the other time you have should be put to something useful. And of course, again, you need that vision because you need a why behind the things you do. Why would you play chess? Well, because it helps you think more strategically, but also it helps you be more disciplined. Why learn Spanish? Well, now that I'm in Uruguay, I kind of need it, and it's good to be at very least bilingual. So you need a why uh, behind everything you do. But yes, discipline is something that needs to be built over time behind a vision.
Yeah. Um, One of the things that as well has struck me about this is I know when this idea first came to Doug Casey's mind, this was very much about um, putting an alternative path for young men. And you're the first guinea pig, so to speak. And it is very much focused on, even as you talk about it, about young men like yourself. Why do you think there is a need to focus specifically on young men? Do you see that there could be a separate program or a parallel program for young women as well? Or is this really something that is specific to young men?
Well, I think that it's easier for us to focus on young men because we can relate, and I am one. So the frame of thinking and interest, overall interest are that span across millions of young men. Like every young man wants to know how to fight well or race a car. Those are all things that we can understand. So that's why it's primarily focused around young men. Um, and of course, the preparation can, and any young woman could go through the preparation as well. And because the individual tailors it to themselves,
Right.
uh, who knows what a young woman could do with that? But could there be a specific program for young women in the future? I don't know. I don't think I would be able to create that or participate in it. I don't think Doug or my dad would either. But
Mhm.
if someone did it in the future, I think that would be fantastic. We'll just have to see.
I
Uh,
guess one layer of it is, if you follow Jordan Peterson, he often talks about how kind of young men are adrift right now. This generation, it just doesn't really have role models. It doesn't really have structure. The world has shifted so much in favor of supporting and actualizing young women that young men have kind of been left in the dust. Um, does that track with you?
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the world has shifted towards focusing on young women because I think it's the world is focused on something much more dark that actually destroys young women as well, which I think is too complex to talk about now. But
Mhm.
yeah, young men are not. I mean, I could say the typical thing that a lot of people say that young men aren't valued, but I don't know when in history young men were really valued that much. I think value comes from the individual putting in effort over time. Like if you were to line up a crowd of young men, you can't just go, "Oh, you have value." Pick any one of them out of the crowd. No one's going to do that. Same with young women. Of course, it's a little different, but yeah, I would say the culture overall has shifted away from at least allowing young men room to become men, and
Mhm.
uh, that's the more important part, and that's what the preparation is trying to do for sure.
Yeah, very important. I know one of the things that you've talked about that's important to you, and I know that it's important to your father, is developing a moral code, and that's one of, I guess, I won't call it a skill, but one of the elements that you are working on, and that's kind of central to the whole path that you're on. So, talk a little bit about what that means to you, and how your experiences and the life skills that you're building kind of fit against that, developing that moral code?
Well, I think most people don't really know what a moral code is, at least not really. It's hard to describe, and while trying to prepare put together a book for the preparation, my dad and I went over the difference between ethics and morals for a long time, and that was a central focus for a little while, the difference between those two things. But we basically came to the conclusion that morals, having a moral code, is a personal code of conduct. It is, um, I mean, it should be a list. It should be a written list that you come up with on your own time, outlining the things that you will allow yourself to do and not to do. And that is definitely something that's not around anymore. There's no
Mhm.
moral compass, no moral code. No one's going to go. Very few people are willing to look at something and go, no, I won't participate in that, or I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm not going to allow myself to do this, or because of my beliefs, my code, the compass I am following, I am obligated to step in, to
Yeah.
take action. And again, learning skills is a good thing, but at the end of the day, none of it matters when it's compared to a moral code. You can throw all the skills out the window. It means nothing if you don't have a moral code. Nothing at
If you,
all.
yeah. If you don't see right from wrong, if you don't have a way to define those things in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. Man conquers the world by conquering himself. Absolutely. And if you cannot control yourself, then you cannot control the direction of your life, and you are definitely not going to live a life that feels fulfilling. And you're also not going to be a good leader. Probably, you could even go further. You're not going to be the best husband, father, son, brother. You become an overall better person once you develop your own moral code and set yourself on a specifically or individually defined straight and narrow path. So hopefully we I don't know if we'll call it a moral code because it seems like a hard idea to get across to people. But we'll we'll try to add something like that into the book. So hopefully we explain it well enough that and emphasize it well enough to
Hmm.
give to people.
I'm really pleased to hear about the experience that you've had. I find it fascinating. I love following your blog and hearing about all the things that you're doing. It definitely gives me hope. I hope it feels that way as well for our viewers. Before we go, tell us about what's next. What's on the docket for you in 2025?
I'm not quite there yet. I like to finish off the year, and once I get closer, I'll get a better picture of things. Just because week to week, month to month, things change so
Mm.
much. So I want to get there, and then I'll figure that out. But I guess if you want to eventually get the answer or my answers to what I'm gonna do, then checking out the Substack page and following along there would be the best thing to do.
Excellent. Yes, I definitely encourage everybody to follow that Substack. It's easy reading, it's short, and if you can find it in you to give Maxim some encouragement, I'm sure he would love that. But he obviously doesn't need it because he's doing just fine on his own. So thank you so much, Maxim. I hope we can have you back and check in and hear how things are going, maybe in 6 months or so.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and hopefully we can do another podcast in the future. That'd be awesome.
Would love that. Folks, I hope you found that as useful and interesting as I did. We're always so grateful to people like Maxim for coming on and sharing their time and their unique perspectives with us every week. We couldn't do any of this without you, our readers and our viewers, and we're so thankful to each of you as well. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button now and share this video with people you know. Also, please follow us on Substack. We post new stories there every week at collapselife.substack.com. And we're on Twitter. We're growing our audience there at collapse_life. And then lastly, please check out our great designs in our Collapse Life store. And then head back here next week for another great episode. We look forward to seeing you then. Until then, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.